You're listening to Don't Waste Water.
As I close the 12th season of this podcast, I believe I can say that I've been covering water for long enough that I thought I've heard every angle. Incredible water tech, visionary water finance, big infrastructure projects, digital solutions, mind-blowing NGOs, public-private partnerships, and so many more conversations, all interesting in their unique fashion, if you ask me. But the beauty of the interviews I cut each year at the Rethinking Water conference in New York is that the deal is for me to let serendipity guide me through guest discovery. And honestly, if it had been for my curation, I would probably not have invited the 3 guests you'll hear this week, while it would have been a shame. Those are stories I hadn't heard before, and I suspect you haven't either. Take Guatemala City. When I learned that a private company there has to drill 400 meters underground, past 200 meters of contaminated water, just to find something clean enough to drink, I realized we're not talking about typical infrastructure problems. We're talking about a country so heavily impacted that groundwater contamination goes deeper than some mining or oil and gas rigs. Or consider this, in Mexico, farmers still flood their fields to water crops. The same method their ancestors used centuries ago, something I discussed with Seth Siegel in a different edition of the conference, by the way, but that explains how 80% of the country's water goes to agriculture, while skipping just 1 flood irrigation per growing season could save millions of cubic meters of water per year. Simple maths, huge impact. And then there's the Amazon, where I discovered that planting trees correctly involves 17 specific steps and costs about €10 per tree, not the $1 that feel-good websites promise. The woman behind this work will tell us why cheap tree planting is mostly greenwashing and why doing it right actually helps farmers get more water for their crops. So I believe you may walk away from these conversations with 3 stories that will challenge quite a lot of what you know about solving water problems. No massive government programs, no billion-dollar infrastructure projects, no waiting for perfect policies, just smart people figuring out what actually works in their specific corner of the world. And today we'll hear from all 3 of them, starting with Andres Rodas, right after I thank my sponsors for supporting me, Simple Lab and Bluefoot Membranes. When 30% of Guatemala City's water supply depends on one private company drilling through, as I just told you, 200 meters of contaminated groundwater, you're looking at either a disaster waiting to happen or the only thing keeping millions of people alive. In this conversation, you'll learn how a private water company became so essential that the municipality can't survive without it, and why that creates a dangerous dependency neither side wants, what happens when poor residents pay $100 monthly for water, while middle-class households pay $40, and how informal water markets actually work, why Guatemala operates without any national water laws, and how extreme political positions on both sides prevent basic regulation, and finally, why a century-old distribution network gets acquired by a bulk water supplier, and what that means for demonstrating private water management. Hi, Andres.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for stopping by.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Alex recommended you. Why?
I have no idea, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I do and myself. I am from Guatemala and I operate in Guatemala, and we own a distribution company and bulk water to the municipality of Guatemala. Currently, we manage 20,000 gallons per minute in the city's water, and we're the largest private provider for the municipality. We're also the cheapest source of water for the municipality as well. And I'm here for Alex's invitation, learning about what developed countries have to offer a developing country in terms of technology, policies, and as well as imaginative solutions for water problem. We have 1,500 millimeters of rain a year in the city, and yet we have scarcity of fresh water. So it's a big challenge we're tackling on. We're going in from the private sector, trying to provide solutions. Obviously, we have to go hand in hand with some public policies and public institutions. So it's a big challenge where we are basically have a clean slate in terms of policy, starting with the left foot in terms of the water qualities. We have 90% of our water is compromised and polluted. So here I am.
Let's deconstruct the first part. You're supplying bulk water to the municipalities.
Yes, sir.
Where do you get the water from and how do you supply it?
So we have underwater source, a big underwater source we extract the water from. We have to do wells that are as deep as 1,200 feet. However, the first 600 feet are sealed. We don't extract water because that's already polluted and compromised. So we extract from 600 feet and deeper. That's how compromised the water sources are in Guatemala. So what we do is we extract that water. we treat it, and we deliver it to the municipality to a pumping station. So the reason why we exist is because the need to invest in a country or in a place that the water quality is bad is very heavy for public institutions. So we are more versatile. We get to invest, we get to innovate, and that's what we basically started off doing.
So you're a pure private play, or is it kind of blended capital which comes into you?
We are pure private, although we work with public concessions.
Okay. And the concessions last for what time?
So the last contract we signed was for 25 years. Those are about to expire in 6 years. We've been operating for almost 20 years. And the problem that has happened is that we grew at a much accelerated pace than the municipality did with other sources. So now it gets to the point where we provide 30% of the water the municipality manages. So if we don't renovate a contract, the municipality is in trouble. It's a tough position to be in because we want to keep working, but we don't like to be the main source of water for a public company because it would be sort of dangerous to be in that position.
So what is it that you said you want to look at what's done in the developed world and how you can translate that in the country you're active? How would that look like? What exactly are you looking for?
We're very different in terms of development, but we have the same issues. One of those issues, what perfect example. Today, they asked the Secretary of Climate Change from the White House, how do you convince politicians to pay attention to water and invest in water? Because water is not something that will decide the voting results. That's the same problem in Guatemala. So that's getting those ideas and those answers were amazing.
I was about to say that, that we don't do better here. So anywhere in the world, with the exception of probably Singapore and Israel, you have little political buy-in.
So you would think you don't do better in those terms, but people have access to fresh water here in the United States and in various European countries. We don't. So there has to be a gap. There has to be something we're not doing that you all are doing. There is definitely not going to be all the solutions we need here. Like I mentioned before, let's go to the sources of water. The United States has water treatment for drinking water, but the source of water is already clean. So that technology for us is obsolete because we're taking literal sewage water from our rivers and trying to treat it into drinking water. So the technology needs to be more advanced and it's not being developed in this country. That's an example of where we can find a good fit. Let's go to Arizona. There was a dean from the school of Arizona State University where they said they recycle 90% of their sewage water. That's the kind of technologies that could help us. So basically, we're going to places like the desert in the United States to see how they manage the water to try to replicate those technologies in Guatemala, where we're not a desert, but our water is so pure in quality that we can find that common ground.
Are you looking to emulate the technology, or are you looking to partner up with companies and then import technology and apply it to your plant?
So whoever brings in the best solution in whichever form that may come. The major obstacle is that most of these companies are providing solutions for small water flows. It's not large scale yet. And that's what we're looking for. We would love to partner up with someone and fix the problematic with water. But if it's buying technology, if it's replicating technology, we know we're in diapers in scientific knowledge coming to water treatment. So we're open to any advice we can get.
Treating water is as simple as paying for it, roughly speaking. I mean, you'll find a technology to treat whatever is in water and you'll always find a way. Sometimes it's just going to become very expensive. So where do you set the bar? What are you ready to? Because I guess my question leads to how much can you do a back-to-back? Like if you now can treat the water which is in the first 200 feet because you have the technology to treat something which is super highly polluted. Will your end user pay the surcharge for it?
So here's a couple of harsh realities. The people who pay the most expensive water in Guatemala are the poorest people. And I think that's a truth worldwide when it comes to developing countries.
Absolutely.
So we did a study on how much they pay for water. Turns out I am from a middle-high income household. I pay around $40 of water a month, roughly. People in poor communities are paying as much as $100 on average a month. Why? Since there's no clean water in their tap, they have to buy we have the famous trucks that carry water. Every house in Guatemala is designed thinking of having a reservoir. That's why the big plastic containers have become such a big business in Mexico and south of the border, is because they use that as reservoir because they get water for 5 hours a day or for 7 hours a day every 2 days. So what they'll do is they'll just let that fill up and then use the water. What is the alternative? People get water in some colonies they call them colonies, the residential areas, from 11 at night to 3 a.m. So everything you need to do with water needs to be done in those hours. So I know people who need to wake up at 11 at night, take a shower, clean plates, do the laundry, and save some water in an eco filter to be able to drink the rest of the day, and then try to go back to sleep and wake up at 5 a.m. to go to work. So I know with what we've developed, we can provide water that is more accessible to them than what they're paying right now.
What is the bottleneck?
So this is very interesting. The bottleneck is a lack of collaboration in the public-private sector.
At what level? Like the municipalities?
So we're one of the few countries that do not have a law regarding water.
Okay.
So that's one harsh point. And we have two groups, extreme groups. Some private groups say we don't want any law regarding water. We want to keep using it. We have other groups that say, no, we need to heavily regulate water usage and disposition. We believe, coming from somebody who lives off this, of water, that we need to find a regulation that can create a sustainable ecosystem in water. And when I mean sustainable, it needs to be able to grow. It needs to be clear enough for private companies to want to invest in infrastructure and solutions. It needs to be accountable for all players, mostly regarding wastewater, because right now we're not treating it. And it also needs to be equitable, help provide for all citizens with clean water.
I don't want to ask you about a 2030 goal because I think I get the vision of where you're heading. What needs to happen in the next 6 months? Where do you start?
It's a very interesting timing to ask that question because the distribution company we acquired, we signed last week. So it's a heavy question for my next 6 months. Where do we want to be? So in the next 6 months, we need to clean the distribution company. This distribution company is the only company in Guatemala that has a private concession for water distribution. It's 100 years old. And we need to fix it up. We need to make it better than it currently is. So we can be an example of what a privately owned distribution utility can do for the end consumer and for the city. And I would like to develop in the next 6 months, finish our master plan for infrastructure development in the city to have more access to water.
And so what is your KPI, if you have a number? So what are you watching which tells you you're doing a good job?
My KPI would be to substitute 100% of the water the company currently uses.
100%.
Substitute it. Our current water sources need to be better. We need to provide better water than the one we're providing right now. So we're using superficial wells. So they have a little bit more contaminant. We need to treat them a little bit more. I want to get rid of those, and I want to work with deeper wells like the ones we have in our other company, because I have the theory and we have the idea that we're using too many treating chemicals we need to get rid of.
That's a nice vision. I look forward to see how you roll that up. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much, Antoine.
And I wish you a good rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andres, for this fascinating conversation. Let's move now to our second topic. But before that, let me thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. Testing water and everything around it should be simple. With Simple Lab, you choose what to test, from drinking water and wastewater to soil, air, food and surfaces, and they handle the rest. Kits arrive at your door with free round-trip shipping, samples go to certified labs, and results come back fast, concise and actionable. Trusted by leading brands and growing teams, Simple Lab offers hundreds of ways to better understand your environment. Get started today at gosimplelab.com. It's the first link in the description. Thanks Simple Lab for supporting my work. And back to me. Let's now look at twice 80%. 80% of Mexico's water goes to agriculture, and 80% of that irrigation still uses ancient flood methods, which should make for a perfect storm where technological changes could save millions of cubic meters of water if anyone had reliable data to make decisions. So, in the following conversation, you'll learn how Mexico makes water allocation decisions without knowing how much water actually exists or gets used, and why reliable data networks are the foundation of everything else. What happens when you eliminate just one flood irrigation event per crop cycle, and how soil moisture sensors can save millions of cubic meters annually, and finally why enforcement of water regulations fails across Mexico, and how smart technology could make compliance automatic rather than optional. What would be an elevator pitch to what you're doing and to your company?
My name is Agustin Breña. I'm Deputy Director at IMTA. IMTA is Mexican Institute for Water Technology in Mexico. And I'm here because I want to just look at the new ideas that are shaping the future of the water sector in the United States. So basically how these ideas can be, adapted or moved to Mexico.
Mexico is a big section. I don't know if you read the book of David Sedlak. I can't remember the name of the latest, but he has like 2 chapters on Mexico specifically.
Okay.
To show great examples of how Mexico would be a source of inspiration for southern US states. So it's funny to see that you come here to seek inspiration, and you're also quoted as an inspiration for other countries to look at. So what are main challenges which you've identified and which you'd like to find new ways to overcome?
Yes, one main issue in Mexico, especially in the northern part of Mexico, that shares many issues or many similarities with the southern part of the United States, is actually water scarcity, and how this has been exacerbated over the recent years. Because I would say three things. First of all, of course, climate variability or climate change. Droughts are becoming more frequent and more severe. Also, infrastructure, lack of sufficient funding for upgrading the water infrastructure across the main users, water users in Mexico. I'm talking about agriculture. I'm talking about the rural sector. And also, probably the most acute problem is management. So in Mexico, water management models are still quite outdated.
Okay.
And the one thing that is missing here, in Mexico, is lack of reliable data. So decision making should be made based on data, on real-time data, on accurate data about everything, like how much renewable water is entering every year into our water systems, into our rivers, into our reservoirs, into our aquifers. And unfortunately, that's not the case of Mexico because of the lack of reliable data and observational networks.
So out of the three challenges you listed, that sounds like the one you want to start with. So water management.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you address it?
Well, first of all, by investing and setting up a reliable data observational network, not only about how much water is available, but also how much water is extracted out of these water systems. So how much water is being used by the industrial sector, by the agricultural sector. Here in Mexico, unlike the United States, the main water user is agriculture, is irrigation. We are estimated that between 70 and 80% of the total water use in Mexico is for agriculture. And about in agriculture, 80% of the irrigated surface is still done by flooding the fields, like flood irrigation. So it's the most inefficient irrigation method, but still the one that is prevailing across Mexico. So we're talking about data. Also, we're talking about smart management models. For instance, one pilot project that we've been carrying on at IMTA is smart irrigation project, where we measure in real time soil moisture, and then we are reducing the amounts of flood irrigation during the crop cycle. Something that we learn is that we reduce by one irrigation flood event during the crop cycle, we can generate savings for about millions or tens or hundreds of cubic meter per year. So this is a very efficient, probably one of the most cost-effective ways to save water in agricultural areas.
And so what kind of inspiration on that specific topic do you find here? Is it the way to get the data out? Is it the way to manage the data? The way to irrigate crops?
Yes, actually, it's how here in the United States, like irrigation is, what are the new technologies and management tools to address water inefficiency in the agricultural sector. But also, like, for instance, the keynote we had today was also very inspiring, because something that we've been addressing, or something that we are concluding from our work in Mexico, is that regulations need to be more sophisticated. And right now, with all these new sensors, smart metering devices, IoT, how data and technology could be useful to improve water regulations.
How do you frame a regulation? How can you influence the fact that Mexico takes new regulations on water? What's your role in that? Is it an advising role? How are you writing stuff?
Yes, we at IMTA, we are part of different working groups on the specific regulations in the water sector. So, for instance, there is one very important regulation in Mexico, which is how you estimate the water budget at the national scale. So when you estimate the water budget, this is to know, so the government, then the water authority, can know how much water is available in the ground, in the rivers, in the surface. And according to this, what type of new users can become is for water rights entitlement. So if a catchment or an aquifer doesn't have any more water available, then it's no longer possible that this user can get its own water permit. But if it does, if it has enough water, then it's still possible. So how technology can improve this type of regulations for positive impact in the environment.
It's an interesting one, because usually in the water sector, we have this dichotomy that things move when they are regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Technology gets adopted if a regulation enforces it. And you're saying that it could be the other way around, that because technology is available, regulations can now be put in place, which is really the reverse from what we usually see. So why would you have this reverse approach to regulations?
Well, another thing that you mentioned now, when you're dealing with regulations, another very important aspect is enforcement. How do you enforce the regulations? And unfortunately, in Mexico and such as in many other countries, enforcement is becoming a very important problem because you don't have the resources to enforce some or most of these regulations in terms of like water extraction or water quality, water pollution. So I think technology right nowadays is playing a very important role in regulations, not only in improving the regulations, but also in enforcing these regulations.
So Mexico was the first country where the allocated money to bottled water exceeded the allocated money to utility water, which means the US are a very close second, but they haven't crossed the threshold yet.
Mm-hmm.
But in Mexico, the threshold was, I think, crossed in 2017. So
yes,
that means that people are spending more money on water, which covers 0.01% of their needs than on the other 99.99% of the water. Is that like a lost game, or is it something which you can reverse?
Yes, I think that both like public sector and also the private sector can address this by enabling more transparency for drinking water, for water supply. This is one of the main issues that most of the people in Mexico, they don't trust the quality of the tap water that they receive. So in this is a problem because like water utilities, this is like a vicious circle. So people, they are not used to pay, or they don't like to pay for the water service. They don't pay to the water utility because the water utility they don't provide good water quality. So the revenue goes down because they're not getting money from their clients.
So it's a devil's circle because you get less money, so you invest less in infrastructure, hence the water quality degrades, hence you get less money, and
right.
hence...
Yes, that's exactly what is happening.
How do you break it?
Yeah, I think by gathering data about, for instance, the water quality, measuring what the water quality, for instance, in different parts of let's say in Mexico City. So if you demonstrate the drinking water from the tap is still within the limits of the regulations, then people can start to trust again in the water utility. And of course, they can drink water, so they spend less money in buying bottled water.
So do you think it's a water quality issue? Is it a water data issue? Or is it a communication issue? Meaning, if the water is already of the right quality, then it's just about communicating it. But if it's not from the right quality, then you have to start with that to better the water quality. So where exactly would you put the threshold? Is the water really good and you need to communicate about it? Or is there some work on the quality as well?
Yeah, I think it depends because in Mexico, there are different water quality issues depending on the region. So for instance, in some central parts and northern parts of Mexico, arsenic is an important problem. And on the other side, for instance, you go to southern parts of Mexico, then coliforms is another issue. So that will depend. Once there is a strategy or like at the national scale about measuring tap water, then we can start somehow to map where these inefficiencies and these problems. And then we can somehow estimate or have a rough idea about whether this is a communication issue or rather a technological issue.
What is the awareness of the water challenges for the average Mexican? And to give you a background to that question, if I'm right, water scarcity in Mexico City caused the cathedral to sink because there was an overabstraction of groundwater. Or do I mix my stories? If you see the cathedral sinking, I guess all of a sudden you realize that there's a problem.
Yes.
Does that help with the awareness, or is it like, oh, that's life, what can we do about it?
No, yeah, I think it's becoming more evident that the issue that the landscape is sinking in Mexico City is because of groundwater is being extracted more than the replenishment rate. And many people are aware of this. And I think this is a problem that involves the government because it's the authority managing the water. But actually, I think there are efforts over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years to diversify the water sources for Mexico City. So the aquifer stops declining, the water level stops, the declining rate starts to reverse. But on the other side, all these solutions to bring water to Mexico City from other catchments or other aquifers are very expensive solutions. So it's becoming more frequent to propose or to suggest nature-based solutions inside Mexico City. So for instance, reusing water, applying some wastewater treatment, and then storing this water in lakes or wetlands within the metropolitan area of Mexico City for urban purposes. So I think, yeah, it's a matter of diversification of the water sources. So actually the main source of water in Mexico City, which is the aquifer, can be managed in a more sustainable way.
Well, thanks a lot for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you.
And I wish you a good rest of the conference.
Yeah. Now I finally met you in person. I think I will start watching your podcast.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks, Augustine, for the heads up. And before I move to the third and last section for today, let me thank my sponsor, Bluefoot membranes. Have you ever heard of a membrane that refuses to break? It sounds uncommon, but it's true. Meet Bluefoot Membranes, a Belgian company that has developed the first and only unbreakable membrane specifically designed for MBR. If you're new here, membrane bioreactor applications. This technology is setting a new standard in wastewater treatment. Water engineers and industry experts have tested this membrane, and no matter how much they pull and twist, the membrane holds strong. Now, it's not just about membranes, it's also about an award-winning and passionate team that doesn't take impossible as an answer. The people at Bluefoot Membranes are driven by a mission to make wastewater reuse the new standard, united by a shared purpose to leave a blue footprint on the world. So yes, they manufacture cool membranes, but they also push the boundaries of what's possible in MBR technology. To learn more about them, check the link to their website in the description. A big thanks to Bluefoot Membranes for sponsoring this episode, and back to me. You probably saw those ads, right? Well, when tree planting organizations promise to plant a tree for $1, they're either lying or doing it so badly that it won't survive, which is what Andrea will tell us in a minute with her €10 per tree model that actually works and is the best way to help farmers access more water for their crops. In this third conversation, you'll learn why proper reforestation requires 17 specific steps over 3 years, and how cheap tree planting is mostly greenwashing that gives people false hope, how working with farmers instead of against them creates water corridors that improve crop yields while meeting Brazil's 20% reforestation requirement, and finally, what happens when you turn meaningful environmental action into luxury gifts that fund real biodiversity projects instead of buying one more tie or one more jacket. I'm told that you're doing charity work in the Amazon.
Yes. So there's two things that I do. One, I'm involved with the Black Jaguar Foundation, which is actually a Dutch organization that plants trees in the Amazon.
Okay.
That plants trees in collaboration with the farmers, which is quite unusual. So we go to a farmer. We have to feed 8 billion people. So we have to work with them. And we say, we would like to help you go within the law, which is 20% of the farms should become forests. And we help them reforest, keeping the biodiversity and only planting indigenous trees. It's a beautiful project because it brings life inwards as we plant on the corridor of the Araguaia River, which is the second largest in Brazil.
So that's one of two, you said?
Yeah, so that is the main one.
Okay.
And two, in order to fundraise for this organization, I started Tree Love. And Tree Love is a gifting platform. So I'm trying to change a little bit the mindset of people in giving gifts. For example, it's your birthday. Instead of giving one more tie, one more jacket, I mean, we have too much. I feel we have a lot of things that we don't need that much. Then instead, we give something that is meaningful. So in that case, to change the Amazon, which will change the quality of our air in the future. So I curated a platform of gifts done by indigenous, done by artisans, 100% sustainable, 100% good source, and they are beautifully packaged, and that represents the amount of trees that you give. So it is a bit boring to receive a paper saying I've donated 10 trees for your birthday. So instead, we package that on something that represents the amount of trees. So a sculpture, a heart, linen napkins that are embroidered by ladies that are in prison or that are in the favelas and the organizations in Brazil. So it's quite, they're really beautiful. So it's nice to get a gift like that. But the real gift is the amount of trees that you donate that includes on the price of the gift. It is a non-for-profit. So the intention is not making money, it's just giving something meaningful.
Support the flywheel of reforesting.
Yeah, we say change the future with the present, instead of in the present.
That's a good one.
The present. That is the idea. But it's mainly changing the mindset.
So how do you work with the farmers? Is there some education you need to do with them to get them?
Terribly, the best way to work with them is when they see the result from the first farm we worked with. So that's how it started in the beginning. We go to agro fairs, which is like high vibration is what they are selling, pesticides. Those people are having meetings, and we try to explain that by becoming part of the Black Jaguar Foundation Biodiversity Corridor reforestation project, they will get more water for their crop. So it's education, it's helping them become legal within the law that 20% of the farm should be forest, and helping them do that properly. So we get seeds from indigenous trees and we plant them in nurseries, and we wait that they are big enough, and then we plant the trees, and then we wait 2 to 3 years that the trees are big enough, and then we leave. So when people ask me about carbon, sorry, what did you say?
But so the first claim is not carbon. The first claim is water, because you're saying that it helps them to get back access to water.
Yeah, because it brings water inwards, because it's on the corridor of the Araguaia. The water goes in once you have forest on that area. So they see that the crops improve, and that a lot of people ask me if I do that for carbon credits or if I get funded from carbon credits. It's very hard because it's so dysregulated, the whole system, that what we do is so compared to a monoculture of eucalyptus trees in Africa, which is like the worst thing you can do. We are planting indigenous trees, keeping their biodiversity and looking after these trees for 3 years. We're not just planting, receiving the money and walking away.
Yep.
We are actually looking after them, because one of the biggest problems in the Amazon right now, and people don't realize, is the brachia, which is a species of grass that we brought over from Africa to feed the cattle, because everybody wants grass-fed cattle. And these are very invasive species, and they're killing the little seedlings of trees. And so we have to keep the brachia out when we start a reforestation project, for as long as the trees are big enough and don't have shadow.
I see.
And once the shadow are there, the brachia doesn't grow. But so it's a lot more work than just planting a tree. And we often see organizations that plant tree for $1, one tree for $1. That is impossible. It's impossible to. And if you go to the small print of these companies, it's written you are giving $1 towards planting a tree.
From a rule of thumb, how much does it cost per tree?
Now we are charging 10 euros a tree. I say on my website 7 pounds, because I try to keep it, when you say 10, it seems so big. When you can donate, for $1 is the idea. I don't want to greenwash my platform. I don't want to say, a pound for a tree. And even if in the small print it says is only towards, because the whole idea is taking greenwashing out of the equation here by doing something serious and something people should be proud of, being part of a project that is real.
When did you start?
I didn't start it. I have to say that who started the Black Jaguar Foundation is a Dutchman called Ben Volks, an amazing guy. And he started 5-6 years ago, and I joined them 3-4 years ago. So I joined very much in the beginning, and I'm part of their board, and I'm involved in the fundraising. I go to visit the project many times, try to do promotional videos and things as well, like work with media, but mainly to find ways for people to see what an amazing project it is, because being green now is in fashion. So everybody wants to be green, but you have to, you want to do the real deal and not look good for the outside. And if you visit the project and if you see the way it's done, from buying the seeds, the indigenous seeds from people that are starting a business by collecting the indigenous seeds from indigenous trees, and by doing that, they are planting trees so they can collect more seeds to sell to us. And then we plant in the nurseries, we let them flourish, then to prepare the soil as well. It's 17 steps, the whole process. It's quite intense. Wow. And then we prepare the soil, we plant the seedlings, and then we make sure they do well until we leave them. Actually, the most special thing is when we leave the forest, when there is a nest of birds on the tree, which is then you think like, oh my God, I've done the full circle. There is actual beings living on the tree. So it's quite special.
So over that 5-year time span, how many trees have you planted? Or if that's not the right metric, how many farmers have you worked with?
Depends on the farmer and the kind of tree we are planting, because we are keeping the biodiversity. Some are trees that you have to plant first so that when they are big enough, other trees that only grow in shadow can be planted.
I see.
So it's an ongoing process. But when you leave the forest is alive. It will work within itself. It will help each other because all the trees are there to help each other grow. And that's the beauty of biodiversity.
And so you're saying that there's a regulation who says that 30% of the surface should be planted. If you were not there, probably the regulation would not be enforced.
Yeah, the amazing thing is that the laws in Brazil are very good, but they are not followed.
Yeah.
So if it would follow the laws, they are we would not be in a difficult place. If people wouldn't buy soya from farmers that are not, sustainably accredited, we wouldn't have a problem, because we have to feed 8 billion people. So we have to plant, and we have to, and there's this craze. I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not vegetarian only because of the cattle. But it's also crazy to see the amount of soya that is planted in the name of veggie burgers, and the soya is also being planted in areas that were forest before. So I think being real and doing the right thing is being able to see the big picture and not this polarized world that we live right now of right and wrong. And if you go there and if you see the reality of things, it's a little bit different,
What takes you to a conference like this one?
I am here for New York Climate Week. I do a lot of work with Human Rights Watch as well. I think policy change is the main thing. If you want to make a difference, it has to start by the law. So I'm an ambassador for Human Rights Watch in Brazil. I'm at the UN seeing some talks on financial inclusion for women. And I just believe in giving back. And I think the matters of climate are a lot more pressing than people think. I'm embarrassed to see friends of mine that are still in disbelief or they don't believe that much. And it's something that gives me a proper anxiety. I would like to make a difference and play a part on this. I feel I have a social responsibility.
I understand the climate aspect of it. I would agree with you that it's still not solved, and it's good that we have Climate Week to speak about climate. But within climate topics, water is really on the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the agenda. And honestly, this year, it's not even on the agenda. If it were not for this conference, water would simply be left out of the climate question. So what takes you to a water conference, and what's your take on the underrepresentation of water topics within the climate equation?
I completely agree that water should not be on the bottom and now represented so low in the agenda, and it's a disgrace. And I wanted to come to this conference to learn and understand, because that's not my area. I would say, when you go to COP, you have the green people, the blue people, the ones that invest in the water, and then the ground. I'm in the green group, but I am diversifying our giving more into the blue, more into water and water management. It's something that it's very interesting. My son, who works at Scenes, explains me and has taught us a lot about it and has drawn the attention. And I have to say, I'm very impressed what I saw here and the speakers you have. And I really hope this will be a drop in the ocean, a beginning, a ripple with lots of a huge ripple effect.
Science is doing that for 3 years, and they're doing a huge job and a great job at putting it on the Climate Week's agenda. Nevertheless, not even water scarcity is on the agenda this year of the Climate Week, which makes me wonder if there's anything from an external eye, because you're looking at the water from the external. What are we doing wrong?
I think we need an amazing film to make people understand with good source. I find the biggest...
You do know that Science Water is a partner of Blue Tech. Blue Tech has already done Brave Blue Word, and now they're publishing Our Blue Word with Liam Neeson as the narrating actor, Matt Damon.
I feel we're going to change with people getting knowledgeable about it. They need to understand how bad it is. Somehow planting trees is more understood than water, and that is wrong, because you have to do a little bit of everything. That's my area of expertise. That's why I work in there. If you would be asking me why I want to move to that area, I know the people, I can be more of a difference right now with my knowledge and the amount of work I've done in the field. So it wouldn't be a time to change, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't diversify and throw the attention to other topics. And I am very keen, after what I've been hearing here today, to continue to do that.
And there you have it. 3 conversations, 3 completely different approaches to the same fundamental problem. How do you actually solve water challenges when traditional solutions are not working? Here's what stood out to me from today. First, honest pricing beats feel-good marketing every time. Whether it's Andres charging what water distribution actually costs in Guatemala, or Andrea explaining why €10 trees work while $1 trees don't, the people doing real work are not afraid to tell you what things actually cost. You have to be ready to listen to them. Second, technology only works when it serves clear human needs. Augustine's soil sensors save millions of cubic meters because they solve a specific problem farmers understand. Smart tech for its own sake doesn't change anything, but if you're a regular listener, you know that already, right? Third, the regulatory gap is bigger than the infrastructure gap. Guatemala has no water laws, Mexico can't enforce the one it has, and Brazil's good laws get ignored. The technical solutions exist, the governance to implement them, not always. Fourth, Private solutions emerge when public ones fail, but that creates new challenges. NRES, for instance, provides essential water service, but nobody wants 30% of a city's supply depending on one company only. These arrangements may solve immediate crises, but they may also create long-term dependencies. And finally, the people paying the most for water are always the ones who can least afford it. This showed up in every conversation, from Guatemala's $100 per month informal water costs to Mexico's bottled water spending and to Brazil's environmental costs being paid by future generations. By the way, if you want to hear more on that, I strongly recommend you listen to my conversation with Gary White from water.org next. But for today, I know that's a lot of information in a short time, and you maybe didn't have a block and a pen to take everything down. Don't worry, I distilled the key learnings I gathered from about 250 podcast episodes and 100 exploration videos in my weekly newsletter, along some deeply curated bits and pieces from around the internet. So if you don't want to miss out on that value, subscribe. The link is in the description, and I'll see you next week.